So, first of all, meetings offer a forum for ideas to develop cumulatively, for ideas to, develop organically, for ideas to develop strategically. So it's a platform where different minds come together. And like we know, there's a heavy portion of knowledge sharing, rubbing minds, interrogating thoughts, and then coming to some consensus or some resolutions around key items. So the board meetings will help this. At the board meetings, you see that the directors will stimulate one another's thinking in order to offer better solutions to problems. And this always provides a platform where ideas can, go through a process of crisscrossing, a process of gleaning, and, again, those ideas can be thoroughly interrogated by the minds, of this director. I mean, by directors who have diverse experience, diverse background. The same thing also for our management or the leadership meetings. We will see a lot go into these meetings in terms of preparations, and then we see so much coming out in terms of the outputs and the kind of resolutions and key takeaways from these meetings. So this speaks to what meetings are. And of course, the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance 2018, stipulates that meetings are the principal vehicle for conducting the business of, sorry, I'm just trying to minimize for conducting the business of the board and successfully fulfilling the strategic objectives of the company. You remember we started by saying that the meetings are used to analyze they are part of the strategic management process, and they are used to as vehicles to analyze the company's focus, the roadmap, and what success should look like for any organization. So that's a reinforcement by the National Code of Corporate Governance, which has become our Bible in quotes. So most of the work performed by the board is done at board meetings. That's the truth, So you cannot have an effective board if from the onset you do not have your annual board calendar. Whether you are in the private sector, you are in the public, you're working with a public company, whatever space you are at, ensuring a critical governance structure, of managing, drafting, managing, and implementing a board calendar is really important. I could, almost feel some of you saying that we're for private companies where the governance structures are not so tight. The truth is that a small company today, right, that imbibes and adopts the principles of governance is definitely heading towards becoming a big organization. I want you to just pause, and think about that for a moment. The Cadbury's of this world, the Nestle's of this world, they started from people's kitchen. These were family businesses, right, that started small, became focused on developing their structures internally, externally, and incorporating the right governance structures. And automatically, this company started growing organically from someone's kitchen to becoming a global organization that, a lot of us will be proud to work for. So if you are with a small company today, for instance, you need to look inward and help that organization look beyond just the owner-manager structure. And one of the effective ways to do this is to institutionalize management and board meetings. If the board members, or there's maybe no board, no advisory board, because a lot of SMEs, they get away with that. It's something that a corporate secretary or anyone charged with looking after such an organization should begin to talk about with the owners. My recent exposure to working with SMEs as an consultant, it's been really shocking hearing things like, oh, the cost of governance is a lot. And that a lot of these SMEs, the reason why they just don't think that institutionalizing governance structures is what they really want to do now, because they believe it's expensive. But my dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, COVID has taught us otherwise. A lot of small businesses just, they have gone with COVID, and COVID is still here. Those that, even manage to cross over, let's say to this year, they have had to cut off a lot of things, losing focus. Gradually, the company is going down. That is, it's really hard, hard. It's really sad. I've had to consult with some of my clients that, before COVID started, just trying to get them to, okay, adopt this, engage a consultant that will help you look at your risk management framework, that will advise you on your compliance, that will help you with institutionalizing, some of the basic principles of governance. And some of them will tell you, no, my focus is to maximize profit, right? All those kind of companies that that the owner is everything. Everything is centered around the owner. They took a hard, COVID took a hard hit on them. So this is the time for us to really, really help our companies, our managers, the management just pivot and begin to look at how they can bring in all those laudable initiatives around governance framework. So a quick win is to say, look, we have to start having our meetings. We have to be open about these meetings. We have to, incorporate meetings into our scheme of work. And not everything that the board will do will be conducted through the board meetings. So an effective board meeting will leave the members of the board focused and energized. A lot of time, we'll get to know why this sometimes, may not be the case. And of course, the goals and the outcomes of the meeting will be very, very clear. Meetings, especially what you term as the best board meetings, should leave the team motivated. You have a part where you motivate and appreciate the management. That I always find very, very heartwarming when the board, especially the non-executive directors, will just take time to speak about how management is performing. That for me puts a lot of energy into what management is doing, not just about what management is not doing well. When a meeting starts on that note, you can be rest assured that the energy level will be sustained. So the best practice suggests that the board should meet regularly, and this can be decided, by the board. But for those entities that are regulated by statutes, for instance, those who are under the purview of the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, it stipulates that the board meeting should hold at least 4 times in a year, that is every quarter. And adding to the credence of having meetings, especially good meetings, the code also stipulates that meetings are the principal vehicle for conducting the business of the board and successfully fulfilling the strategic objectives of the company. Having established the importance of board meetings, we're going to look at how we can build an ecosystem for the information at this meeting to flow effectively, smoothly, and in order to produce the kind of outcomes we want. I have a quote here by Patrick Dunn that says, board meetings ought to enhance the success of a business, and for thousands of companies they do. Yet for many, these meetings are viewed as irrelevant, which is bizarre when you consider the amount of effort, cost, and stress involved. You can see that the background to this may be some of the things we'll be talking about later, about the times of crisis, the moments a board becomes group, the board trend becomes that of a group thing, or when you have a domineering chairman or certain members of the boards that just want to dominate the meeting and always talking about their ideas, their perspective, etc. So therefore, we need to be deliberate as those charged with governance. We need to be deliberate about building an ecosystem for information to flow smoothly What this means is just being intentional about analyzing, number one, the critical stakeholders for the meeting. I could, if this was a physical class, that would have been a question to just ask. That who do we think are the critical stakeholders for an effective board meeting in particular? You can put the answer there on the chat room. Let's hear from you, our dear participants. Unless we could take one or two people, if you put your hands up quickly, I can unmute you, and then we take your comments on this. Who are the critical stakeholders for an effective meeting? Yeah, Olubobokunla. Sorry, I'm not pronouncing your name well. Says independent directors chairman. Yeah, Shofola Osho says management who will prepare the memorandum to the board. Obaro August says management and the board. Odogu says executive directors. Shofola says directors who will sit at the meeting. Osho, Shofola again. Thank you so much for all of these comments. But if I may, just helping us summarize all the things we have said, I believe there are three very, very important people who are key to helping us build this ecosystem for the information flow. Yeah, Oshosho Fola, yeah, I can see the company secretary, definitely. The chairman of the board. Nobody said that. The chairman of the board. We just said, the directors, even some said non-executive directors. And of course, the management. You may not agree, but I want you to just pause for about 10 seconds and think about it. For us to have an effective board meeting, building an ecosystem, building the structures that will help us, make it an effective meeting. I am suggesting the company secretary, the board chairman, and of course, management. Without the management, the leadership team, starting with them, working with the company secretary, you can't even have a tight agenda that will be presented to the chairman, who will either agree or disagree on certain agenda items. So for those of us who did not remember the chairman and management, these are really the guys working behind the scene. These are really the people that will determine how the information will flow, how the meeting will even go. In fact, while I was, working with my previous organizations, PZ, Cadbury, there's something that is sacrosanct that I find very fascinating. That is what we call the meeting before the board meeting. This meeting, especially my time in Cadbury, you just have to, PZ rather, it's a must. It's not something if you miss meeting with the chairman before the board meeting, you're on your own. You know what I mean? You will just see the energy would not be as effective if you do not meet with the chairman, the CEO, the CFO, the corporate, the company secretary and the chairman, and maybe one or two other management people just come in and say, chairman, this is what we are going to be doing tomorrow. This is how well we have fared, or this is how badly we're doing. And you manage his emotions, you allow him to throw the tantrums there, you allow him, speak to you and, express his disappointment. And you allow the chairman to just, have that opportunity for him to express himself first. And you wait and pack all of that to the board. So for those of us who feel that at the moment, our board meetings are always frosty, the chairman and some other directors are not just, they're always hard on management, it's something you may need to think about and propose to your organization. It's something that you give it a try, it may come as a surprise even to the chairman than me. Nobody comes to me before any meeting. And then you explain the new orientation to him, and then you allow him to glide into it, to come on board very gradually. And if he says a hard no, then you pass it on to your CEO to talk to him about, look, we need to always, some chairman will suspect that there's something you want to hide from the rest of the board. So you need to think about all of this and anticipate what a chairman will say. But it speaks to what we are trying to do here, ensuring that there's an ecosystem, there's a structure around the information that will be disseminated at the board meeting. I hope everybody can still hear me. Testing the microphone. Secretariat, am I still good? Thank you, Ajayi, Atilola. Thank you, Adedayo. Thank you so much, Oluwakemi Benita. Thank you, guys. So still on this topic, Chizoba Udeozo, you have a question? Chizoba, I'm unmuting you now.
Okay, sorry. I wanted to let you know that we are hearing you, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you, Chizoba. Hello? Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. Yes, we can hear you. Can hear you.
Okay, welcome.
So, while being an ecosystem for information to flow, information is the lifeblood of the board. You all agree with me. So without information, we know that, of course, the board cannot act on nothing. Information is so critical, and transparent, accurate, timely, and relevant information will always give them a basis for good decision making, especially for the board that really wants to work and, help the organization. So a board can never be effective if its members are not supplied with the right information. And the code, again, requires that the board should be supplied in a timely manner with information in a form and of a quality appropriate to enable it discharge its obligation effectively. So information is the lifeblood. Yes, we are looking at Omojayogbe's comment. I'll deal with that later. Okay, thank you for raising that comment. We can see Omojayogbe's comments in the chat room, but let's quickly look at this. So the code also requires that the board should be supplied. Everyone that you expect to work effectively will need information, will need materials. It's like digressing a bit now, appointing a new board member rather, and you miss the orientation process or the induction process or the onboarding process because that board member is very busy and you've just not been able to get around to sitting him down to conduct a proper induction. Do you know how much such a board member, a director, would struggle if that foundation is destroyed, if that foundation is not laid? No matter how brilliant, no matter how, no matter the profile of that director, if he's not taken through the nitty-gritty of what an organization is, especially the strategic focus, not just the operational issues or things that you probably can read in the newspapers, but bringing him in to have a feel of the look and feel of the company, the culture, bringing him for him to understand what are the key drivers of the numbers and the top line, the bottom line, and just helping him integrate. We know that such directors will definitely struggle. So we're going to keep information as a critical aspect of what we do. And the board member should seek out current, complete, and accurate information about the companies on whose board is served. Yeah, that's the onus is on them. But the company secretary also plays a major role in helping the board members come up to speed with relevant information. So a company secretary plays a key role in communicating the board decisions to management. That's still, building on the structure you have laid for information dissemination, from the board to management. I used to call these the sort of decisions that will go into the log book. So I have the minutes. I also have the logbook. The logbook, everyone can decide to just take a very what's it called, a nice notebook, right? A nice notebook or a diary, and begin to write out the things that you need to pass on to management. Those who are not part of the board meeting, but those who decisions, or rather those who need to reflect the decisions of the board or implement the resolutions from the board meeting. So you create a separate log book. I call it the decision log book, DLB, decision logbook, and then I ensure that I put in all the action plans and the request from the board to this level, this senior management, mostly their senior management, and then I put a tracker. Recently, of course, there are lots of apps. You could just create one where there's a tracker, and all of this will feed back into the matters arising at the next. So there's a connection between that logbook, your minutes, and of course the matters arising. So the board secretary is responsible for relaying the issues that management deals with when executing the board's directive. That speaks to that. So now that we have laid that, we know that as corporate secretaries, we have a lot to do because we are seen as the governance captains. That's a new one I just coined, the GCs or the GCOs, the Chief Governance Officers of our organizations. So it's something that we cannot just take and, think that is okay or heap that responsibility on anyone else. It is our turf. It is our call. And we have to be seen to be doing it really, really well. So you could add that to the label that we already have as company secretaries, as compliance officers. We are now tagged the governance captains. I'm going to trademark that, by the way, or the chief governance officers of the company. Now, I do not want to miss our colleagues' comments here. Where is the chat room again? I'm looking for the chat box. There was a question around the chairman being too busy to have a pre-meeting catch-up. I just want to speak to that is a culture that is not really common. That's the honest truth, because like we will all agree, most of these board chairmen, they are very busy, but it's something we need to just help them to appreciate and then begin to imbibe. I had a breakthrough because it was just something that I learned from a previous company secretary at work with, and I felt it was a nice to have, and I took it with me, and I was able to introduce it to, the chairman of companies that I subsequently became the substantive company secretaries at. It was something that they found originally very suspicious, that okay, if you want to come and have a board meeting with me before the real board meeting, what is this all about? Until we're able to let them know that, look, in order to manage firstly the chairman, because the chairman will be running and presiding over the meeting, that it's good to unveil a lot more, in quotes, and help him to internalize the issues that will be presented by management through the various board reports. We saw the value proposition in that singular act to the chairman, and he bought into it, and it became a part of our system, and it was known to the board members. It wasn't something we're doing in secret. It was just to help us have a better flow of information, and especially helping the chairman, who is really crucial, because a bad or a good meeting, okay, let me rephrase that. When the meetings are very good, the chairman is applauded. But when the meetings are not so good, they look at the company secretary and they start looking for excuses as to why, certain information was not adequately presented, or some board paper, they just heap it on us. And, even at the AGMs, when the AGMs are fantastic, chairman gets, an applause. So the point I'm trying to make, just taking off all the humor here, is that we need to devise a system that works to ensure that the chairman is well equipped, the chairman has enough information for him to be the, admirable chairman that we want him to be. Your own idea could be something else entirely different from what I have said about having a pre-meeting with the chairman. But it's really up to us to just keep being very creative, keep being very innovative, especially now, where the new normal, COVID has thrown everything off, and we have to almost like think on our feet 24/7. So we're at liberty to really, really begin to think about other activities that can help us manage our critical stakeholders well. But remember that the board meetings are such, is a key aspect of the strategic management process. We cannot treat it with, oh, this same old same is always been done like that and I don't have to change. Okay, so I'll pause here to look at what Oshosho Fola is saying. That so in some companies, especially private company, the chairman is executive. Yes, an executive. So for such chairman, meeting with them to discuss perspective may be a challenge. But when there's a dichotomy between the CEO, it's easier. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So, you treat each case on the merits of, everything will be scrutinized and applicable to your situation. So if, of course, when you're talking about the chairman or a chairman being the like executive chairman, it's certainly a private company. And there are other things you can do around how to help them with building that structure around having very effective board meetings. For instance, if you are working with such a chairman and there's no advisory board, at the minimum, you should be suggesting that there should be one, should help them to also have some consideration for bringing in a board. Because like I said earlier, COVID has taught us that you cannot just be on your own. You cannot keep doing things on your own and think that everything will be okay. We have COVID now to begin to rely on or to use as an example or as a scenario on why companies should not just be Abiola Sende and company, is Abiola Sende herself. Like I said at the corporate governance on MITV, I think 2 Thursdays ago, Abiola Sende and Co is Abiola Sende. Anything happens to Abiola Sende, God forbid, the company is gone. We need to begin to sell that value proposition on why governance should be institutionalized where we are and when we're consulting with our clients. Okay, so having looked at, we started by building our the value in having high impact meetings and what that really entails. We moved on to look at building an ecosystem for information to flow smoothly. Now we're going to look at some communication tools. We're building these layers upon layers to help us. So we have looked at the importance of the three key people we talked about, that is the CS, the chairman, as well as management, when we're looking at how effective a meeting can be. And of course, we talked about some initiatives about how we can help the chairman, who is really, really the person who's going to preside over the meeting, to help us, in achieving our outcomes and landing on that mark of effective board meeting. So now we'll look at some of the communication tools that can help us with these objectives. And I'm so glad that some of these tools are going to become very relevant, and a lot of us should be able to resonate with these tools now more than ever. It's been almost a year now that we've had a 360 turnaround in the ways we work because of COVID. I've had chairman that would tell you that the board meeting can never, ever be virtual. In fact, when we started having virtual board meetings last year, it took a while for me to get that out of my brain because I've never had one too. Yes, we've had meetings where directors would dial in, a few directors that may be out of the country, one or two, maybe once or twice a year. But to have a full virtual board meeting, never had it in my life. Even though most of my time has been with multinational companies, but it's always been a physical meeting. People will fly all the way from Netherlands, they will fly from the US and come to Nigeria, mini holiday and all of that, and have the board meetings. So the communication tools to ensure that we have effective board meetings have become a lot more relevant. So if by now talking to your board or management about board portals, right, and the board packs and all those apps that will help you synchronize and digitize your board materials, then that means we haven't started. We are not yet, we are still warming up to get out of bed. That's the truth. So the company should deploy relevant tools for effective information flow. I got into the board packs, the board portals, platform, I think about 5, 6 years ago. And initially it's so stressful getting the board members to key into having an iPad or a tablet where all the board papers have been preloaded and where they can just, open up and annotate, mark up, have their comments, send notes to one another. Director A can actually share thoughts about a particular point or agenda item with Director B, a full communication tool. And there was so much resistance. But we keep forgetting that humans, we are made to adapt to change. So that is our DNA. So when we go the other way, it's just a matter of time. Is it that we are bending or we are breaking? Okay, so we need to begin to sell the value proposition. Yes, some of us will think that, oh, it's an expensive tool to have for us to have these tools and for us to be able to deploy, but we should think again about what is more cost effective. Now, more than ever, we need to look at the cost benefit analysis. If our boards will refuse to go digital, then how are they going to be future ready? How are we going to prepare the company to even, pivot and become more technologically driven, which is actually the future? That's future of work. So we need, 2 years ago, nobody would have been able to force every board member to join by Zoom or Skype. You can't even take such a proposal to your chairman, right? It would just be an impossible task. I'm deliberately looking at chats so that we can take your comments and also, make this super, super interactive. So Chibudike is asking that would a group mail exclusive for board members suffice as an effective replacement for board portal? And no, because the group mail is just what it is. It's just a mail server, and you need to help them integrate some of these more modern tools. And there are lots of cost-effective ones now. There's a lot of competition in through these portals. The companies that offer the board pads, board pads apps and all those things, they become really competitive. So you can get the ones that you can negotiate and also get your company to, somebody said like board effect. Absolutely. That is Omoja Yogbe, yeah. Then Obaro Rora Ogo says the portals are very useful as they allow you to replace them. Absolutely. So this really resonates with us, and I'm glad. So a board portal is a web-based workspace. For those of us that may be new to this, it's a web-based workspace that allows directors to securely access board documents and collaborate with each other, with other board members electronically. And I said that earlier. So the board portals can allow the companies to provide director with sensitive information in a secure and timely fashion. Okay, so going back to the question about the group mail, for instance, the group mail, is sort of limited. You may not really be able to track comments. It may not be real time online like you will have on the board portals when you're working there. So just think about it. And if cost is an issue, like I said, do your research. A lot of the board portals firms apps are becoming more popular, especially since the advent of COVID, where everything has just gone virtual. So you can take advantage of this moment now and look for the cheaper options, the ones that are being developed by the younger firms, the new startups, and are not as expensive as the ones that have been in the market. For instance, Diligence. I'm used to Diligent. I'm used to BoardPack. I think Diligent bought BoardPack also. BoardPack was an Ixan software or so. And, so you have so many of them now in the market. So let's move on quickly. We'll take comments as we go along. Okay, so we've said this already, that other friendly, user-friendly tools should be considered for adoption. And then another critical tool is the annual board calendar. This speaks to the board plan for the year, and it's all interwoven. So when you help the board to draft, because the onus is on us again, in conjunction with management, to draft the annual board calendar, is like the broad, comprehensive agenda for the board. So management will begin to draw from that to prepare the necessary board papers and the information required. And that board calendar, you have days like the board strategy day, the board learning days, the board learning days. My experience is a day where you bring some of the other senior management staff, like the heads of marketing, if he's not a board member, the head of procurement, the head of supply chain, and you allow them walk the board through some of their strategic focus or some of their major projects. And it's like a mini strategy session with the other members of the management team who are not represented on the board, who are not, the board papers will crunch everybody's report, right? So even if you have representation on the board, it's not all the executive directors that will be on the board. Typically, you have the CEO, you have the CFO, and maybe someone who can combine marketing and HR, all those strategic business units, and that is it. Because part time, especially for publicly quoted companies, you cannot have, there has to be a right mix, a right balance of non-executive and executive. So that always puts a limit on the number of executives that can be on the board, even though they have the label board, but they are functional, directors, they have the label directors, but these are functional directors and not necessarily board members. So talking about the annual board calendar, you can have the board learning day, exactly what I've described, where you have, apart from the board strategy session, you have this, or you can incorporate that into the board strategy session, such that those who are really the drivers behind some of the things that are presented to the board will come forward and add to the conversation, and they will be able to help the board have a deep dive into pertinent things, the pertinent agenda items, the pertinent issues that the company is facing. So it's a really high level strategy session where you have the critical stakeholders around the table. And if your meeting will be virtual, everyone should test out technology in advance of the meeting. That is really, really important to know. I'm peeping into the chat room now. Yeah. Thank you so much, Obaru Rora Ogo, for your comments. That is absolutely true. So we now move on to, we've laid the foundation for all the things we're building on. It's like this is like a fourth layer now. Clarity of substance in communications. So the corporate secretary should ensure board reports are presented in a user-friendly and non-technical way to allow board members to ask what lies underneath and see the answers there and then. This is really important. While working as the company secretary of some of the organizations I've worked for, you really see the helplessness of some of these board members. Like alluded to the fact that they can be extremely busy, and some of us, some of the reports, you see people putting SKUs, for instance, and a board member can use the next 10, 15 minutes thinking about what is SKU? SKU. And you're wondering, and they are distracted from the main focus or message that report is trying to present. Okay, you find things like SBU, acronyms that for the life of me, they know, but probably for just that moment, they have forgotten. Or it's been a while that they, had the experience of some of the things we are doing. So from experience, because you see the frustration, and it's normally on the CEO or the company secretary. They tell you, company secretary, your board papers, we can't read your board paper. You didn't put one board paper there. Maybe you put your governor's report, but all the board papers are yours, because you are the one mailing the board papers to them. You are the one, giving them the board paper. So everything comes back to you to say, you did not read out your supply chain reports. What is Project Green? And even you cannot even speak to Project Green, because Project Green is a code name for a particular project that you don't want competitors to know about until it's launched. You know how we just code all these things, you know? I have had so many projects, Project Apple, Project Shark, Project Bark, Project this, Project that, and we forget to help the board members understand that these are, you know, technical terms. You know, either we put some footnotes somewhere, or we ask that the paper drafters, those that the management team members, the HODs are giving you this report, you ask them to just simplify it and make it non-technical. So it will allow the board members to see what you want them to see. And what you want them to see is, oh, these are the strategic areas where we need your intervention. Or, oh, these are the things that we really need you to know and support. And these are the things that, oh, you know, so it starts with us. I go through, although it's a daunting task, all the board papers, right? I seek first to understand, like Stephen Covey would say, seek first to understand before thou passest it on to your directors. So we can't afford to be lazy. We can't afford to outsource that to the directors. We need to, as good corporate secretaries, you know, deputy secretaries, those who are assisting us, the legal assistants, we need to help the board. We cannot afford to say it's none of my business. I just get there, take my minutes and leave. No. Once you're saddled with the responsibility of circulating the board papers, please take a moment to read through. They are also your board papers, because guess what? You're going to be recording the minutes. You're going to have to summarize at some point some of the key highlights of the report in your minutes. If you're talking about finance report, for instance, your finance report cannot be bland. You can't just record only the decisions and resolutions. You have to crunch the report like we all do, you know, summarize it. So if you don't understand it yourself, how are you going to summarize it in a way that once they pick up your minutes, is clear, is crisp, and it is, you know, it's saying something. So the clarity of substance starts with you as the governance professional. So for instance, if anything, you know, happened to the company, whether good or bad, the questions that should come to the mind of management and the company secretaries: do we need to tell the board? When do we tell them? And what do we tell them? Now we really need to move fast. Okay, so clarity of substance continue. The CS should make sure that the information provided to the board is reasonable in amount and can be read and digested prior to the board meeting. So for instance, think of how furnishing or not furnishing the information may play out when a matter considered by the board, you know, gets litigated. That's a good litmus test. If you're thinking of withholding or not furnishing the board with that information, how would the board feel if they open the newspaper the next day and it reads, company XYZ is into this? We had an experience I had an experience at PZ where we just opened the newspaper one day, and then the report was that PZ UK was selling PZ Nigeria, something very, you know, very bogus, and of course it was not the truth. And we had to keep, you know, start doing some damage control. And at the end of the day, it was discovered that PZ UK actually released some results that alluded to the fact that because PZ Nigeria did not do too well, it affected the global result, because PZ Nigeria is the biggest PZ company, by the way. Is a large chunk of what PZ is globally. So if Nigeria sneezes, you know, PZ Global will catch cold. So the information was distorted, and we had to start with the board, with our critical stakeholders, and just try to get everybody to reverse that, you know, misinformation. It was so misleading. So these are some key questions. I'll leave you. Now, this is a role playing where we're supposed to talk about, you know, but there's no time for that. talk about some of these things that if you were a non-executive director, how do you ensure that you have all the information you need presented in an appropriate manner to enable you carry out your role? Okay, does the board decide on the information it needs from management to make informed long-term decisions for the company? Have you influenced the content, length, structure of board papers over the past few years? What could be done to improve them, and so on and so forth? Please take this with you. That is the homework from me to you. Please just read through. It's a role play. You can just, reflect upon it. When you are doing your board evaluation exercise, it could come really handy as well. I put all of this together from experience, from some of the things I have heard, seen done and all of that. So you could just look at it as a critical take home. And if you like, maybe Ixan will give you some prize for whoever, will complete this and send it back. That's a joke, right? Okay, so we go to decision making. We know what that is another critical aspect of our strategic management process. Decisions have to be made. If you don't make one, that in itself, like they say, is a decision. Okay, so we look at how this is done at a very high level. So I'm not going to start asking what is delegation, what is voting, what is consensus. No, we know all of this. It's just to, project to us and just give us, put some spotlights on how decisions are made. They're either made by being delegated from the board to management, management to the HODs to the officers, the general managers, the senior management team, and so on and so forth. And then at the board meetings, if a particular matter is very sensitive or very, very weighty, or what's that word? Very sensitive, or is really, yes, contentious, we can subject such to votes. And then, of course, if there's a deadlock, we have the chairman, casting the, chairman has a casting vote where this can help to swing the decision in favor of the majority. So the decision-making process depends on the working relationship within the board. There are some very formal board, absolutely formal. Everybody is a big oga somewhere. So you feel the vibes. We feel the vibes, company secretaries, we know. Because when someone is, acting out, and we know when others are trying to show supremacy of thoughts, of values, of intellect, and all of that. And there's some board is just like a family thing. Most such board, that chairman's friends, there are like 5 of them on the board. We all know, what I'm talking about. Or the owners of the companies are heavily represented, So it depends. It depends on the look and the feel of the board, really. The culture of that board will always. I have had different scenarios where most of the decisions is by vote. And some of the decisions, everybody will just go with the consensus and, nice, easy, neat, and everybody moves ahead. But in all of this, it is important that the board should operate with mutual trust and respect, and always, have that at the back of their mind that everybody should respect everybody, and we should avoid we should never get to the point where what we see is groupthink. I'm going to pause for a moment there and see if we have questions so far. Any question? So groupthink, yeah, I was just going to talk about that. Groupthink is a situation where the decisions are governating towards a particular director or set of directors. Everybody just says yes. Once they raise their hand, everybody's looking at them. And once they have, made a recommendation or a suggestion, that is a yes for all. The company secretary needs to be very, very alert to that. And don't let us be tempted with the fact that, the decisions are actually in favor of the company. We need to think about other critical stakeholders, like the 4-way rules of, is it Rotary? Is it the right thing? Is it I can't remember all of them, but we need to be the independent observers. We need to be the board advisor. We need to be the facilitator of the decision-making process. A lot is on us, so we can't afford to be carried away and just forget our role. So we need to break that groupthink. How do we break it? The easiest tool is the board evaluation process, because you cannot go to anyone and challenge them, but you need to help whoever is driving the board evaluation process, to know that there's that tendency for some directors to be domineering, and therefore isn't, because at the end of the day, it's the interest of the company that we should keep in focus. We want to leave a legacy where, oh, my time, the company did this, the governance structure was superb. It was a model board, it was this, it was that. So we need to, behind the scene, help if we're engaging external consultants, like the ICSAN consultants, we have trained and certified board evaluators, at ICSAN, by the way. So you can always reach out to ICSAN to ask for recommendations on those who can help your board evaluation. So you need to quickly put that on the table. And if you're designing the questionnaire or the templates internally, you also need to quickly reflect some of these things that you're picking, the vibes you're picking from the board meeting. So you have to be independent, you have to be creative, you have to just be there thinking about the entire stakeholder spectrum. Your stakeholders are not just those who have shares in the company, they are those who have a stake in the company. So you are their eyes, you are their hands, you are their governance professional, you are the gatekeeper. A lot rests on us. That's why we cannot afford to just, look the other way. And a heavy dose of emotional intelligence, emotional stability, maturity will help us. I'm looking at my time so that we can cover all the slides. So let's quickly move on to when we need to avoid, how we can manage. We can't avoid crisis, but we can manage them as we go along. But I'm going to pause and see if we have any question or anything so far. Okay, I'm looking at, okay, so no questions, no comments. Okay, so crisis, tension, conflict, they are all part of this process. We cannot have, we can have a beautiful life, beautiful board relationships, and, but these things will come up intermittently where they will arise, they will, I mean, even if it's a family business where more than half of the board members are related. So that's when I think you'll have more of all sorts of things coming up because of vested interest. So a skilled corporate secretary can mitigate some of the stress and frustration by keeping informal channels of communication open and encouraging realistic and constructive exchanges between the board and management. This is where you have the board and management, crisis moments where the board is feeling that management is not putting their weight enough, and management feels that, look, unless you want us to just literally die, the market is tough, COVID is tearing our profits apart, competition is this, is that, and the board, for sake of their integrity, credibility, some board members, you go and woo them to come and be the board, members, come and be directors on the board. And they just feel that, yes, they have their integrity at stake. If I mention some names now, some will not even come near some companies. They'll feel like, no, that company does not have a future. And my name cannot be associated with such a company. I have seen all sorts. I've seen board, members just resign or turn down another offer or another appointment of a company they perceive does not have a future. So if a company is doing not well, everything is okay most times. Or if a company starts, dwindling its fortunes and things are not moving as planned, you will see tensions and a lot of, vibes, negative vibes coming out of the board meeting. So again, the company secretary, the legal assistant, those who are charged with governance, managing this, two groups of stakeholders will have to just step up and help de-escalate the issues. And how do you do this? How? Once, there was a time that the arguments and debates were really getting heated, and I insisted, I told the chairman that we needed to have like a 10 minutes recess. And the man looked at me and said, Abiola, that's a good one. And you know, the 10-15 minutes coffee break really helped, because now that, you know, there's a break, the directors that were feeling very strongly about certain issues, they can now talk about it over a cup of coffee and some really nice, you know, delicious meat pie, and the tension in the room can really come. So the corporate secretary, the skilled company secretary, will have to just be alert. You know, don't start dodging the missiles and feeling very uncomfortable. No, that is your moment. It's your defining moment for you to do something, say something, and be something. The chairman himself will be at the middle of it all. I've had the, let me call it the testimony that one of our former council member, Dr. Nechi, shared about how she literally took over the board meeting. You know, she became the acting chairman when the chairman, and, you know, there was a crisis, there was a huge debate, not debate, argument. I'm sure what she did say was that just to the point of the board members carrying chairs, like we witnessed at, you know, the National Assembly. And she told us about how she had to take one group to another meeting room, and then another group to another meeting room. And then when they reconvened, she had to like and hold the chairman. Honestly, I found that so admirable. And I went back, you know, to meet her to say, so how did you do that? She was like, my dear, number one is grace. So the grace of God, because for them to have listened to her, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, this is really, really escalating, and we need to just take a moment to breathe. So I'm going to be asking, with the permission of the chairman, that we just take a 5 minutes, 10-minute recess. My staff or the secretariat has set up some nice cookies from Marks and Spencer or something, just throw a bit of humor. Be careful so that they don't bat your head if that doesn't work. But the onus is on us to help the board with this. And when it's a board crisis or difficult moments, the board could either adopt firm procedures for decision making, even voting to resolve the impasse, or introduce time limit during debate, 10 minutes per speaker. These are very practical tips that could help us. Establish ground rules such as not interrupting others, refraining from personal attacks or judgments, creating opportunities for directors to interact informally. Okay, so this is something that you must absolutely do. My dear colleagues, if the only time your board members they meet face to face is at the board meetings, that is not good enough. You ask me why. They should come do their business and go. No. You have to create opportunities for your directors to bond. You have to. As long as they are board members, it's a marriage. You have to make it work. They may not necessarily be chummy friends and they like each other and all of that. No, but you have to create opportunities for them to at least get acquainted with one another. It helps smoothing the relationships and the, you know, the vibes at the meeting. I keep using the word vibe, sorry. You know, the relationships during the meeting. So you have to create, somebody is leaving the board, create you know, have a dinner. Somebody is, you know, a new board member, throw a dinner. Just get everybody around the table over a glass of wine, a glass of Coke, and you know, get them to just talk outside the company. It works all of the time. Another opportunity is when you put in some board training into the whole board activities, you know, calendar, and you get them to also get into a room, and you would have hinted your training facilitators or the trainers or the, you know, those handling the programs, that look, they should infuse a bit of team bonding exercises into your training. That's another tool that you have at your disposal. No, we're giving you this free of charge. So please take note of this and be very creative. I'm sure some of you will have other things that have worked. You know, for instance, somebody is getting married, one of the board members, and sure, if you have to buy a shobi, and for the ladies directors to be there, get them to just come around the table. Ensure that you have a table dedicated to just XYZ board members, and get them out of the frosty, boardroom environment, for them to just firstly recognize each other as humans. So when they get judgmental, they remember, oh, that glass of wine, and this guy was talking to me about how he supported one charity that I believe so much in. And then you see all sorts of, rubbing of mind. That's when you know that they have a lot of things in common, and that can help just douse tension. Because a lot of times it's not like just ego. Somebody wants to say it all, know it all, be it all, and it doesn't help the relationship.